My name is Douglas Van Dyke Jr. I'm going to give a reading to you from my book, The Widow Brigade, which is my most popular acclaimed book so far. And as I'm not really professional at dramatic readings, I hope you'll just excuse the attempt. Thank you. 2 days passed before the bodies of those slain in the Tyke ambush were placed in Stapelgam, hallowed hall of the dwarf gods, for mourning. The emotion stirred from the surprise attack drew almost every dwarf of the clan to pay their respects in this holiest of places. Mourners crowded the hall as the air hummed with muttered curses aimed at the humans responsible. Guards turned away foreign ambassadors and merchants who would normally enjoy a walk through this portion of the city. The sight of the fallen was reserved for native families. The dead lay on slabs before the patron deities they most worshipped, thin shrouds covering their fatal wounds. Duli moved through her husband's kinsmen in a haze of her own creation. She saw and heard her fellow dwarves, but her mind wandered a world apart. Duli felt alone in a clan that was not her own. The light of her life existed no more. She had barely eaten in the last 2 days, yet her stomach felt no hunger. The few bites Duli forced down that morning settled uncomfortably in her belly, defying digestion. One of the first altars she passed belonged to Tok-Maurron, god of the underworld. Like many others below the surface world, Duli had once held this god in her highest esteem. She knelt before his altar and tried to find words for prayer. Tok-Maurron, god of my beginnings, watcher over my youth, Duli projected her thoughts to the statue before her. I'm afraid I've forgotten the proper way to open a prayer for you. My mother always told me to start by praising the generosity of the gods, but I can't feel any thankfulness at this time. I feel, Duli paused, clearing a lump in her throat, forsaken. She was at a loss in how to proceed. Her mind explored all her worries. The fire of my life is extinguished, yet my body remains. How am I to live on as an empty shell? Half-finished crafts, leather scraps, my livelihood, sit waiting to be completed. My traps on the surface go unchecked, yet I have no heart for it. How can I be creative and industrious when my spirit is so weary from loss? What difference would my craft offer my coin purse? A female crafter, non-clan, bereft of her husband, is little more than a vagabond. Night becomes a timeless eternity when underground. Sleep remains elusive, only to arrive alongside terrible dreams. I wander outside my home to check the great clock in Lower City, only to realize I've spent long hours of the night watching the hearth fire dwindle. In that reflective moment, she finally knew what prayer she sought. I wish to be reunited with my husband. The sorrows wet her eyes. I pray for death. Duli dabbed her eyes with the dark gray head wrap worn about her shoulders. The mulber wool head wraps were the mantles of mourning worn by all the widows. The soft fabric, made from sheep native to the mulberous range, covered their hair, shoulders, and draped past beards. For Duli, the touch of that wool against her beardless cheeks served only to remind her of the sacrifices she made to be with a man who could no longer be with her. She rose up and turned to view the throng of dwarves. Traditionalists composed the majority of her race, adhering to customs long after they were outdated. The loss of her beard was one such example. It was a custom born from the Gods' Wars, when even dwarven clans warred among themselves. Females, so often ignored in dwarven society, sometimes became saboteurs against rivals. The success of those women resulted in clans removing the beards of non-clan females that sought to stay within their cities. The removal of a beard left a distinctive mark that could not be hidden in dwarven society, warranting extra attention from guards. The war faded into ancient history. The custom still persevered. For that reason, Duli's appearance had been slighted. She accepted the sacrifice in order to make her home by Jourdan's side. His death left Duli bereft of her bright future. In her heart, she felt no compulsion to call Tok-Maurron her home. Duli's home was Jourdan, and soon he would be entombed in stone. Duli moved further into Stapril Gom. She came upon Jourdan's resting slab, positioned before the god Nandarin. The god of fire was revered by smiths and those who made war using the black powder of the guns. Guffin Stonebrow, a general related to the king, approached her. He didn't ask Duli how she felt. The general apparently felt the best way to talk to her was to tell her how good of a soldier Jourdan was. "He was a dependable gun to have at your side." Guffin slurred his words. His thick fist waved a half-empty mug in emphasis. "I could count on him no matter what came at us. Now he guards the gates to Dorvanon. He'll serve the gods with as much devotion as he gave to the clan. If only our gods could walk this world once again as they did before the gods' wars, they would cast down the humans. We'll go after the Trikans for you, Duli. We'll bring them justice and a hail of shot. I don't even know why those foolish humans bother wearing armor. Our guns'll tear right through it." Duli nodded, more for his sake than hers. He stumbled off to drink some more. Like the general, her thoughts cursed the humans, but Guffan's threat seemed hollow. How many humans would it take to bring her love back from the dead? Duli failed to understand the attitudes of the men. For the most part, they said little to her whenever they did speak. The males were too busy drinking toast to those fallen. They reminisced about the dead, laughed about past deeds, and lifted mugs in last respects. The women were all too often invisible to them. A gnarled male shambled towards her while leaning on his cane. When Duli saw the pinched face hidden amongst a scraggly mat of white hair, her heart felt a wave of dread. In that visage, she could see the prison destined to become her future. Popgov Rockhand honestly felt he was helping the poor women, while putting them in a position the women considered a form of slavery. Popgov reached out to her shoulder, giving her an arthritic squeeze with his hand to offer comfort. "A sad day this be, but the Menardan Guild is there for you. We'll be happy to finish your training and thus help you provide for yourself." His attitude turned Duli's stomach. She forced a polite tone when she replied, "Jourdan never had to teach me anything. I mastered my craft." The words didn't seem to get through Popgov's maze of hair. "Of course, I'm sure your leatherwork must have made your family happy. The guild is here to help you learn true mastery. The Stonebrows and their kin set very high standards." His tone made it seem that no matter how good Duli considered her craftsmanship, it was amateurish compared to anything their males could teach. "Don't forget, we are here for you. We do hate to see it when women try to craft without the enlightenment we offer. The Menardan Guild will always be happy to take you in." Duli knew he genuinely thought he offered her a favor. Popgov took much pride in what he and his masters could teach. He couldn't fathom how a woman could survive without male guidance. As he continued on, moving towards the next widow, he missed the shudder that ran through her body. Duli's future narrowed. She could try to earn a living on her own, despite the prejudice the males showed towards solitary females. Or she could join the Menardan Guild in order to sell more. In the guild, she would be giving up profits as well as her freedom. Worst of all, her pride in her craft would be slowly dismantled by disapproving, narrow-minded males. The women in Stapelgam observed the morning time vastly different from the men. They were more attuned to the loss that the widows felt. They approached Duli with comforting words unsaturated by ale or promises of vengeance. Duli observed some things lacking amongst her conversation with her friends. Her best friend, Glora, tried to bring her comfort. Glora had her heart in the right place, but not the effort. Duli heard her falter over words and suffer through awkward pauses. The new widow was grateful for her friend, but on this occasion Glora only reminded Duli of her past words to other widows. The leathercrafter remembered how she had always felt unsure what to say when her friends lost their husbands. Glora's uncertainty seemed to mirror her past attempts to console others. Duli knew no words could give her comfort, though she appreciated her friend's efforts. Glora ended the conversation by offering to stop by her chambers later and perhaps sharing a drink. Duli absently nodded. Her friends tried to bring her comfort. None of them really understood the hole in her soul. Some even dared to wish for good things to come to her. Duli felt that nothing good would ever outweigh her sorrow. The tone was different when greeted by older widows. They touched hands with Duli or hugged her. Many offered an open door any time if she needed to talk to someone. They didn't offer false promises or tell her things would get better. Duli felt the most comfort in their presence, even when few words were expressed. Duli was now part of a sisterhood, born from the common feeling of sorrow that bound their emotions. They looked into her eyes and shared their loss. Duli was in their shoes now. With new understanding, Duli could see the shadow of pain hidden in their hearts. Some had lost husbands, some had lost sons, and more than a few of them had lost both. Duli wondered where they got the strength to endure such loss. How did these women persevere? How did they pick up their shattered lives? When does the pain ever become tolerable? Duli felt the need to find someone with whom she could relate the most. Glora, despite their friendship, lacked the ability to understand her pain. Instead, Duli found herself standing next to Shana Horgar. She remembered seeing Shana across the marketplace the day the news hit her. Her husband, Bulgor, died alongside Jordan. Her pain was as fresh as Duli's. Shana's fair hair and golden eyes, both a rare and attractive attribute to dwarves, were nearly covered by the same Mulber wool head wrap Duli wore. She stonily held her outward composure well despite the pain, as expected of dwarves. Even as they spoke, their eyes were on another recent widow who fared worse at hiding her feelings. "That is Katie Dornan," Shauna stated. "She works in the back of Deep Mugs preparing food." Duli noted the young widow named Katie suffering from the shakes. It was a condition of one who couldn't hold back the signs of their inner pain. Their shoulders would shake, even as the sorrows ran unchecked from eyes to beard. Duli listened to Shauna's words. She is maybe 40, perhaps a year or two older. So young, barely past her childhood, though same as my age when I married. I can look back on 12 years beside a wonderful husband. Katie was only married 3 months ago. The two of them watched as Katie's sorrows distracted the male dwarves toasting the fallen. The dwarf warriors called on her to quiet her emotions out of respect for the dead. A few of the widows, women who had lost their husbands a long time ago, went to Katie's side and promptly led her out of Stapelgam. They threw dagger-sharp looks at the backs of the uncaring men. It left a sour taste in Duli's mouth. She whispered her disgust to Shauna. "Why do menfolk feel embarrassed to be witness to our suffering? Can we not mourn in whichever way we see fit? I have lost the joy of my life, as Katie has. Do I not have the right to give in to the sorrows if the pain overburdens me?" Shauna reached up to readjust her head wrap. It lifted high enough for Duli to see the 6 braided sections of her beard. Shauna leaned closer. It is a male world. If you aren't the one serving their meals or spreading your legs for them, you're of nae use. Jourdan made me feel equal. He made me feel loved. As was Bulgar special to me, Shauna nodded. But this is a land of fathers and sons. They care not for our opinions. We are not their equals. Duli and Shauna stood in silence for a moment. Duli's hand came up, dabbing the head wrap against the moisture at the corners of her green eyes. Even with a friend standing next to her, she felt utterly alone. Shauna confided, If Bulgar's death didn't end all my happiness, then it surely ended when Popkov came over and assured me an apprenticeship in his guild. The mention of the guild leader and what he represented submerged Duli's heart deeper into depression. He already approached me, Duli mumbled, just barely loud enough for Shauna to hear. What are you going to do? What choice is left to me? With no eyes upon them, Shauna took that moment to raise the edge of her head wrap. The woman spit upon a statue of Kelor, the god of luck. It was a reaction from someone who felt that the Lord of Fortunes had spit upon her. The fair-haired widow continued without missing a beat. I will lessen myself by placing my craft at their disposal. They will teach me to do things their way. My own designs will be ridiculed, for I do not follow custom. When I finally make traditional items the way they tell me to, they will boast over my craft as if it was their sweat and not mine. The only other choice is to become impoverished, making rogue creations without the guiding hand of a male. The men shun the works of a woman trying to survive on her own. I faced the same prospects. Duli tried to swallow her emotions past the lump in her throat. I have nae need of a male mentor. Jourdan didn't skin animals or craft leather until I showed him how. She recalled her pride when the masters of her home clan had bestowed the rank of master upon her work. Duli did not want to humble herself to a guild of overbearing males. Green eyes looked towards the exit of Stapril Gom, where Katie had been let out only minutes earlier. Duli declared, I won't go to that guild. I could sell my wares to the women. Fair-haired Shauna glanced at her. But it's the men who control the coins. Most women spend only what their husbands or fathers grant to them. Duli closed her eyes. She felt Shauna's arm reach around to offer a slight hug. Don't mind my words, Duli, Shauna whispered. It might be possible to make a decent living that way. Maybe I'll get stubborn and turn my back on Popkov as well. I just can't decide how to face a future without my love. Duli nodded. Same here. She reopened her eyes and returned Shauna's hug. I think I'll be going back to my hall. I've had enough mourning in public. Time for me to be alone. Once goodbyes were exchanged, she walked through the tunnels of the underground city. Few dwarves or outsiders were around. Once Duli had descended as far as Lower City, it seemed as if she was in a ghost town. Listening to her footsteps echo as she walked, she felt alone with her thoughts. Tok-Maurron would never be her home. She briefly entertained the thought of returning to her family's halls, but discarded that idea. It was too far over the mountains, and she wasn't even sure where, having only traveled the route once. She couldn't go alone, and a merchant caravan wouldn't take a female crafter. It might be possible if she joined the Menardan Guild and finished with an apprenticeship, but that could take decades. She would not give in to Popkov at all. Even if she made it back to her homes, she might be forced to remain beardless, a used wife, no good for remarrying, and be a burden to her family. She simply couldn't return. Duli's solitary shadow made its way into Nandarin's halls, her feet dragged as if resisting her fate. A future without Jourdan was an unacceptable destiny. A life alone under the patriarchal customs of Tok-Maurron and Clan Stonebrow would be hell. Her thoughts turned towards a solution taboo to any dwarven god. If living was hell, then she had nothing to lose by dying. If Jourdan was waiting for her at the gates of Dorvanon, she would not make him wait long. Duli made up her mind, and her pace quickened with new purpose. She had to act before she changed her mind. It was up to her to take her own life.